Good morning. Welcome to Right Thinking with Steve Copeland. I'm your host, Steve Copeland, and thank you for tuning in. Let's have a great day. Good morning, everybody. Glad to be with you. Well, I'm just going to jump right into today's show, and as we get into it, you'll appreciate what the term today is that the spontaneity of what's going to be happening today. So today's show is episode 139, Right Thinking with Steve Copeland. Is very pleased to announce that this week's show is called Correcting Corrections, Why I Am in Prison, with guest Lefford Fate. Tune in and hear Lefford share with Steve his passion and offer convincing evidence for why we need to be treating mental illness rather than locking away individuals. This interview is based on Lefford TEDx talk, which is over 500,000 views now, and his recent book, both of the same title. Well, Lefford, thank you for wanting to do this interview with me today. I couldn't wait to do it.
Hey, thank you for having me, Steve. I hope you're doing well.
Oh, I am, Lefford, but I got to tell you, when I called you up the other day to just catch up with you a little bit, I asked you about, so the book, you got a book out recently, and you said, yeah, it's been out a little while or whatever. And I had done your TED Talk a couple years ago. And when I first met you, when Jeff Heiser introduced me, that was the very first thing that what I saw about you. But I just want to lead in to today's show. It's going to get very deep for the listener here because this is your passion. And so let me just say, John 15:12. This is my commandment, that you love one another, and I have loved you. The reason that I wanted to share that scripture is I was at church this morning. Actually, this show's recorded on Sunday. We're airing it on Monday. And you know the song, A Friend in Jesus? Well, I just want to say everybody ought to have a friend like Lefford. Lefford, you're good to me. You're good to me. And over the last couple of years, I would say we've logged in well over 1,000 hours of conversation, whether it be, you've been my guest like 11 or 12 times now. You turned me on to your daughter-in-law, Michaela, who's just phenomenal. I've introduced you to Don Green, Napoleon Hill, and you're just moving yourself further and further into making a difference in the world with the Napoleon Hill Foundation. You're amazing. You make me proud. But what I really want to say to you from the bottom of my heart is, Lefford, I know your career. I'm not going to bring it out today. All your 31 years in the Air Force and everything else you've done, being a international Toastmaster, champion, South Carolina, kind of a person, all the accolades that you have. But Lefford, you're a humble man, you're a servant, and you're one of the most passionate men I've ever known. But you not only, I wrote a little note here that I want to share. It's that I said, Lefford Fate, a man with incredible passion, and not just the desire, but also the drive and discipline to make a difference in the world. So what I wanted to do today is, when you told me that you had written a book on correcting corrections that was based on your TED Talk, I said, well, look, I'll go ahead and read it right away. So I got the Kindle version, and I said, it'll probably take me a couple hours, you think? And you said, I don't know. I said, well, Lefford, it's something that I'm greatly interested in myself. It's all about life in prisons and what needs to be fixed. I mean, the title itself, Correcting Corrections. So I got it. And, I devoured it, Lefford, because it's probably got as much information showing people what the problem is and offering a solution that I've ever come across. And so you're a person that, just knowing you, Lefford, I mean, I'm glad you got a T-shirt on. You have to cut the collar, take it off tonight after you hear this. But, Lefford, I told you the other day on the phone that I just want to be a guy that's like an elementary school teacher. I just want to touch those kids and just be able to share with them and help them move in the right direction. Other people, though, are very high-level people. They get into politics, they get into government, they get into the head of everything. And, what's so fascinating about you is that you're at both of those levels, Lefford. You're touching it at the grassroots level, and you're also a catalyst. And you've told me comments about how you feel like, you're supposed to do more. You're supposed to do more. With that said, Lefford, it's an honor to have you on the show today, but it's more of an honor to know you and be your friend. And I got to tell everybody, when I say everybody ought to have a friend like Lefford, if Lefford calls me, I try to call him back as quick as I can. If I call Lefford, he calls me back as quick as he can. And we appreciate each other. We've got common interests in trying to help other people. And that's so beautiful, Lefford, to know that there's somebody out there like you that if I ask you to do something for me, you're going to do it. Or you're going to do your very best to try to. And so we got each other's back. But today, this show is aimed at trying to help people understand something that is a national epidemic. It's a worldwide epidemic, not just national. But this is your passion. And so please just let's talk about it a little bit, Lefford. Let's talk about what the problem is. And it's all based on mental illness and how the mentally ill. I got a quote from here. Lefford offers convincing evidence for why we need to be treating mental illness rather than locking away individuals. You've got some thoughts about how prison can better serve the mentally ill. So Lefford, wherever you'd like to start, let's educate people today so that we can get them on board to try to help make a difference in this area.
All right, Steve. Well, thank you for all those kind words. I really appreciate it. It's hard to take credit for a calling, and I think I told you this before. I don't think I do anything. I think that God works through me, and it's not from me, and I know it's through me. And I really, really do believe that for those who much is given, much is expected. And I need to do this. I need to do this. I love doing this. And I recognize that there is a huge issue in this country and across the world with mentally ill people not getting adequate care, adequate treatment, and that many of the people that are in our correctional institutions are there because they have a mental illness and they need assistance and they can't get it inside and they cannot cope. And because they cannot cope, they find themselves in a negative situation. And so I think that there's a way to help by acknowledging this. But let me take you back to 2014. And this is in the talk. It's called Correcting Corrections, Why Am I in Prison, just like you said. But I remember I was working in the geriatric mental health program in Sumter, South Carolina. And when I was working in that program, I went there specifically because I was dealing with elder people that were struggling with mental illness and they weren't getting the care that they needed. And some of these people had been suffering for years. There was this one client who was sexually and physically abused by her husband. Her husband was a senior person in the ministry, and because he had such a great following, people didn't pay attention to what he was doing. And she, in her belief, she didn't think she was worthy. So she was struggling with depression, anxiety, agoraphobia. She got to a point where she couldn't even leave her home. And I was working with this lady, and we had a discussion, and she basically said, I don't know who said it and how it came up, but she told her story, which she held in her life for almost 50 years, and she was able to release it. And because she was able to release it and get some help late in her life, she was actually able to grow. And so incarceration physically or incarceration in your own mind, that's what happens when people are struggling with mental illness and don't get some help. So I was working in that environment, and that taught me that there are many people that walk around us every day that are struggling with mental illness that aren't getting assistance. I got a call from the director of the South Carolina Department of Corrections, and he wanted me to come over to Columbia to talk about some issues that they were having based on a lot of mentally ill people in the prisons in South Carolina were dying. Now, fast forward to today, what was his name? Epstein, the guy that just recently committed suicide in federal prison. That was going on in South Carolina back then. There are a lot of people with mental illness that are killing themselves when they're incarcerated. Many are going to prison because of these things. So I know I'm throwing a bunch at you, but the reason I'm doing this is to let you know there's so many issues with mental illness in our world today, all over. And again, people aren't getting taken care of, and then they're ended up losing their lives or they ended up being incarcerated. So after talking to the director, I went in to work for the prison system because they gave me a compelling understanding of the problem. What I recognized not long after joining that team was it doesn't matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter how enthusiastic you are, it doesn't matter how much you want to fix the problem. If a person goes to prison because of a mental illness expecting to get treatment, that is going to be a difficult mission to accomplish.
Lefford, can I
And
interrupt
I
you for a second?
recognize real soon. Yeah.
What I would ask you to do is, people listening to this, when we bring up the word mental illness, sometimes they go right into a block. They don't want to know much more about it. That's part of the problem. You know, it's got such a stigma behind it.
Right.
Can you define mental illness that we're talking about? Because I've been talking to a lot of people, and just the word mental illness, I think everybody thinks they know what it is. They just say, hey, that person's mentally ill. Hey, I don't want to be around them. Stuff like that. Okay.
Wow.
But it is. And
Wow.
I mean, just the word mental illness shuts most people down. And the parallel you and I have is, I go into prisons and I just meet some incredible people that made a mistake. But most people don't want to deal with the people that I know in prison. It's great that you do that, Steve, but they don't want to know any more about it. They shut it down. What is mental illness that we're talking about? Because they're in the book. I want everybody to read this book. I mean, this book is I learned so much. Lefford,
Well, it's many things. It could be depression. It could be anxiety. It can be schizophrenia. It can be post-traumatic stress disorder. It could be traumatic brain injury. It could be so many things. Mental illness is when a big part of mental illness is a brain disease. It could be a chemical imbalance. It could be something that it's a pervasive disorder that negatively affects the way somebody thinks, feels, and emotes. It could be many things. It's not just this or that. There are some people that have what we used to call mental retardation that can be classed in that box that says mental illness. It's a postpartum depression can be lumped into that thing. Being extremely anxious and be agoraphobic where you cannot get over something. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, oppositional of defiance. There's so many things that mental health means. It just means somebody's brain and body's not working in concert. So it's many things. And the issue, when you talk about there's such a stigma, dude, there's such a huge stigma in and out of society. I remember as an American airman, and I think I told you this before, I won't call it clinically depressed because I never was diagnosed, but I was clinically sad. I think I told you this, 1986. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
Yeah.
March 4th, 1986, my mom died. She was 49 years old. March 18th, 1986, my first son was born. I almost lost myself, Steve. I had people in my life that were telling me I should be happier because I had a new son. I had those same people telling me I should be sadder because I just lost my mother. And I didn't know what to do. I'm an enlisted airman. I'm a staff sergeant in the United States Air Force. I'm a cop. I was on PRP, which is Personnel Reliability Program. I carried an M16 with 210 rounds of 5.56 ammunition. Many times I carried a case of 18 high explosive grenades. I was working with nuclear weapons. I wasn't sleeping. I was depressed and distressed, but I was terrified to tell anybody because they may take my weapon. They would not allow me to work. I may get put out of the military because I couldn't cope. I was mentally ill. I was struggling. I was sick, right? I was sick for a time, but I was afraid to go get help. I was on the edge, and I was afraid to go get help because I was afraid somebody was going to say something. Anything could have went wrong during that time, Steve. So when I say what mental health is, it means many things to many people. There are women